And good afternoon. You're listening to Ken Hudnall. This is the Ken Hudnall Show. Coming to you from our studios right here in exciting El Paso, Texas. Gateway to the Old West and the most haunted city in the country. Well, today's October the 14th, 287th day of the year. Just 78 days remain to the year's over with. Holidays and observances. Be Bold and Be Free Day. Stop hiding under wigs and comb-overs or toupees and be bald and free. National Dessert Day. Ada Lovelace Day. She helped invent the computer. One of history's most influential figures. Honor her contributions by learning about her and other pioneering women. And on Business Day. Help support independent businesses. National I Love You Day. Day of Sredisco Valley Cathedral. It's a special occasion in the country of Georgia. Honors one of the most sacred sites in the country. The cathedral is considered a spiritual center for a lot of Georgians. National Real Sugar Day. Discover natural sweetness, enhances flavors, caramelizes dishes, brings a really authentic taste to your recipes. National Face Your Fears Day, International E-Waste Day, World Standards Day, Seed Gathering Season, Red Valley, Anti-Poverty Week, Baby Loss Awareness Week, Truffle Days in Croatia, Oktoberfest in Blumenau, Hemophilia Awareness Week, Recycle Awareness Week, Drink Local Wine Week. Chug it down, folks. National Collegiate Alcohol Awareness Week, Hispanic Heritage Month, and UK Coffee Week. Famous people born on this date: Dwight D. Eisenhower, Usher, Ralph Lauren. A lot of big names born this month. Well, let's see what we've got in the news. Well, as you might guess, failure has few fathers. Success has many. Former President Biden and former Secretary Blinken are trying to take credit for President Trump's historic Gaza peace deal. They all believe it couldn't have happened without them having laid the groundwork. Both Biden and Blinken claim credit for the ceasefire. On X, Biden, who's undergoing treatment for cancer, said he was deeply grateful and relieved that the Gaza war is approaching its end. He said the road to this deal wasn't easy. My administration worked relentlessly to bring hostages home, get relief to Palestinian citizens, and end the war. But he did give President Trump credit for getting a renewed ceasefire deal over the finish line. And I'm surprised he didn't try to take credit for creating the world. Well, president of a union that represents Boston police officers said that people who took part in a recent street takeover in the city were hell-bent on attacking law enforcement officials. According to the Boston Police Department, over 100 people were involved in a takeover that involved street racing just after 2 o'clock in the morning on October the 5th. Officers found more than 100 people trying to attack police cruisers with fireworks and cones and poles and other items. One police cruiser was destroyed by flames and needed to be towed away from the area, according to officials. According to Boston Police Patrolmen's Association President Larry Calderon, those participating in the street takeover were focused primarily on attacking officers. Well, actor Martin Sheen is calling President Trump the biggest nothing in the world. and he offered everybody spiritual advice. He did it during a taping of Nicole Wallace's The Best People podcast. As I say, he referred to the president of the biggest nothing in the world. Sheen played President Josiah Jed Bartlett on The West Wing, claimed that President Trump's actual administration is a corrupt and joyless one. After he blasted ICE agents, suggested they were wearing masks partially out of shame. He said, when you look at this group of people at the round table in the White House, every one of them looks across the table and they don't see anybody who's any better than they are. Well, Martin Sheen is primarily known for himself being not much. Well, Wichita police are asking for the public's help on identifying a woman supposedly taken by force early Sunday morning. Authorities posted photos and surveillance footage showing the woman last seen about 2 o'clock in the morning on Sunday, October 12th, in the 1400 block of North Volusta between Grove and Hillsdale. Investigators said they've pursued multiple leads throughout the city and thanked the community for its support. A Ring camera video showed her being drug away, kicking and screaming. It's a 20-second clip. So far, neither the man nor the woman seen in the footage has been identified. Police said they're considering all the possibilities and have asked help from regional and federal agencies. She's being dragged away from the front door of a house as she screams for help. The footage appears to have been captured by a residential security camera, according to authorities. That's a common feature in that particular neighborhood. Investigators enhanced the video's audio to reduce background noise, hoping somebody might recognize the woman's voice. So far, no answers. Well, fists almost flew on Capitol Hill as the shutdown battle has now turned into personal insults between various lawmakers. These are the people that are leading us, and they're getting ready to have fistfights over the Schumer shutdown. Well, Michael J. Fox does not want a dramatic death after battling Parkinson's for 35 years. He's hoping his death isn't dramatic. Opened up about his future with this mysterious disease, which he was first diagnosed with at age 29. He said there's no timeline, there's no series of stages you go through, not the same way you would with, say, prostate cancer. It's mysterious and enigmatic. And there are not many people who had Parkinson's for 35 years, he said. I'd like to just not wake up one day. That'd be really cool. He says, I don't want it to be dramatic. I don't want it to trip over furniture and smash my head. We'll see how that goes. Keira Knightley is sorry she didn't know about the J.K. Rowling boycott before she joined the Harry Potter audio cast. She said she really wasn't aware of fan calls to boycott the new Harry Potter full cast audiobooks and said she was sorry. All the way to the bank to deposit those big royalty checks. Well, the Army's nuclear comeback is in full swing. This new program aims to break the tyranny of fuel at bases across the globe. It's a new nuclear program to generate power for bases, particularly in remote or contested locations where fuel might be difficult to obtain. Hundreds of millions of dollars are going to be funneled into the project known as the Janus program over the next 5 years, according to Dr. Jeff Waxman. He's an Army official leading the effort. They're going to install next-generation commercial microreactors at military bases. Becoming self-sufficient, of course, would be certainly a step in the right direction. Well, it seems that Diane Keaton and Al Pacino had a on-off love affair. It was known as Hollywood's quietest romance. Al Pacino is having regrets about not marrying Diane Keaton now that the chance is gone. If you remember, she died the other day at the age 79. October 11th, she breathed her last. Actress's family told People magazine that they requested privacy and didn't want to share any additional details about her death. A close friend of Keaton's told People magazine her health had been rapidly declining prior to her passing. She declined suddenly, which was heartbreaking for everybody who loved her, according to a friend of the Oscar winner. It was unexpected, especially for somebody with such strength and spirit. In her final months, she was surrounded by her closest family who chose to keep things private. Even longtime friends weren't made aware of the fact of what was happening. Looking back, Al Pacino's admitted Diane Keaton was the love of his life. He's always called her an amazing woman. Well, Alec Baldwin and his brother Stephen were involved in a New York car crash in the Hamptons. Stephen's representative shared a statement with Fox News. Said Stephen's doing fine, is grateful nobody was injured. He appreciates the concern. He can confirm that he and Alec were both safe and well. The Alec Baldwin himself went on Instagram to recap the crash and assure everybody he's fine. He said, "This morning I was in a car accident, but I'm fine." He alleged that a garbage truck the size of a whale cut him off while he was driving his wife Hilaria Baldwin's car. He said, "I tried to avoid hitting him, but I hit a big fat tree instead and crushed my wife's car. I crushed it. I feel bad about that. But that's all fine, and I'm fine, and my brother's fine, and my wife's car's pretty smashed up. Big tree. Tree's fine." Well, Israel names 2 of the 4 dead hostages returned by Hamas and talks about how they died. One was Guy Yaluz, 26, and Joshua Bepin, 24. The Red Cross acted as an intermediary for Hamas in returning the bodies. IDF representatives informed the families of the 2 and 2 additional deceased hostages whose names have not yet been cleared for publication by their families that their loved ones had been brought back for burial. The IDF, that's the Israeli Defense Force, don't you know, said its intelligence indicates that Luz was kidnapped alive and injured by Hamas after escaping the Nova Music Festival. Later died of his wounds due to not receiving proper medical care. 26 years old at the time. Josie, according to the IDF, was kidnapped from Kibbutz Alumin, where he was hiding in a bomb shelter. The IDF said their assessment revealed that he had been murdered in captivity during the first months of the war. He was just 23 years old. The IDF said final conclusions would be determined after the National Center for Forensic Medicine completed its examination. The identities of the other 2 deceased hostages that have been returned have yet to be released. All this is a result, of course, the returns of President Trump's work, not President Biden. Gaza analysts warn Hamas have saved their weapons for what they call the day after. Hamas executes rivals in Gaza to reassert its control. After President Trump declared in Israel's Knesset the war is over and celebrated the return of the remaining living hostages, Hamas terrorists across the border in Gaza were busy killing its opponents in Gaza City's main square in full view of the public. Videos circulated on social media show the executions, which an Israeli army official told Fox News are Hamas's deliberate attempts to show the killing publicly and reestablish its rule by terrorizing the civilians. Conversation with Fox News, Gazans described Hamas fighters reappearing in the streets and reasserting control. Some have said that could also be their first real chance for change and get rid of the terror regime. Mukammar Abu Sada, a political analyst from Gaza, told Fox News disarming Hamas will not be easy, as clashes between the group and local militias have already erupted. He said this won't happen quickly. We're talking about an ideological organization. Even last night, people were killed in clashes between Hamas and local militias. It's not going to be an easy road. Well, Rutgers student government demands university defend Antifa-aligned professor who fled the country. An Antifa-aligned professor. Students at Rutgers University are asking University President William Tate IV to publicly support an Antifa-aligned professor who recently fled the country after students in the school's Turning Point USA chapter raised concerns about him. Well, according to information received by Fox, the resolution in support of Professor Mark Bray's academic freedom and free expression is slated for consideration and vote on Friday by the Rutgers University Senate. You know, even with the war in Gaza coming to an end, their followers and supporters here are doing their best to keep it in the news. The document asked that Rutgers President Tate and his leadership to publicly reaffirm its commitment to Dr. Bray's academic freedom and free expression and make clear to the Rutgers community and the public that disagreement with the political content of faculty scholarship and speech, absent violations of law or university policy, does not constitute grounds for discipline or institutional distancing. In other words, it's okay. Urge the killing of innocent people. That's part of your academic freedom. Well, Jesse Waters made the point that we're witnessing a historic presidential legacy being written in real time, even though there are many who are trying to steal the limelight, such as former President Biden and Blinken. The New Jersey governor's race could show the GOP how to win in midterms. The midterm elections are a little bit over a year away. Continue pushing the Trump agenda forward. Republicans have to keep control of the House and the Senate. Democrats want to make the midterms a referendum on the presidency of President Trump. GOP should counter by making the elections instead about the ongoing need to reverse former President Biden's disastrous excessive spending, open borders, climate obsession, and soft on crime policies. It's going to take 2 years to drain the swamp. The Republicans need 2 more to replant it. Well, Las Vegas tourists are stunned by the $1,000 dinners they're seeing as tourism falls. When we used to go to our timeshare, it was relatively inexpensive. Well, a group of cyclists tried a unique new anti-ICE protest tactic in Portland, Oregon, beating their rear ends alongside their rage and resistance. Nude bicycle gang rolled up to the city's immigrant detention center on Sunday, blasting music over a loudspeaker while some yelled F ICE and made obscene gestures toward federal agencies. This was seen in a video posted on X by the post-millennials Katie Daviscourt. Some had slogans written on their bare bodies, including "No kings and no human being is illegal." A handful of federal agencies overlooked the naked open border enthusiasts from a rooftop, 2 pulling out their phones in an apparent effort to record this ridiculous scene. Other agencies were forming a barricade on the street. They retreated several yards from their positions to make way for the naked riders. This protest was in a stark contrast with the city's typical anti-ICE charades, some of which have turned violent and have spanned several months. The typical Antifa members, covered head to toe in black clothing in order to avoid identification, were nowhere to be found. Reactions on the the internet range from anger to mockery. According to conservative commentator Robbie Starbuck, if you want to strut around naked in public where kids can see you, then I see you as a mentally ill pedophile who belongs in jail. You can do all the naked stuff you want in your house without kids, but not out in public. And no sane person, he said, would disagree with him. Well, a faith-driven Mississippi artist has honored Charlie Kirk with a powerful portrait, despite receiving death threats. The Mississippi artist with a million-strong following recently went viral for his portrait of Charlie Kirk. The piece predominantly showcased during Kirk's massive memorial event viewed by millions. Samuel Ingram, known on social media as Sam Ryan, painted an image of Kirk with his hands pressed together in front of his face. The artist behind Sam Ryan Studios, Ryan's portrait is suggestive of prayer or reflection. Well, we're heard in 64 countries. And thus far, I have not had any negative feedback one way or the other about all these silly events. A Washington man appeared to be destined to develop Alzheimer's disease, but against all genetic odds, he's eluded the common dementia for decades. Researchers at Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis recently published a study focusing on a man by the name of Doug Whitney, 76, who lives near Seattle. He's got a rare inherited genetic mutation in the Persinilin 2 gene, which virtually guarantees early onset dementia. All of his family members who inherited that gene have experienced cognitive decline starting in their early 50s or even sooner, according to a Washington University press release. Whitney, though, shows no signs of mental decline. Washington University researchers wondered if the reason for his continued cognitive health could help protect others from that disease. In a study published in the journal Nature Medicine, the researchers analyzed his genetic data and brain scans, identifying changes in genes and proteins that could explain how he's defied the odds to remain mentally sharp. And if we can figure out how to do it, let's take it to Congress. Certainly they need help with their mental cognitive abilities. Well, a former Trump ambassador showcases major fundraising haul in a battle to flip a Democratic Senate seat. Former Republican Senator Scott Brown is building a campaign war chest as he prepares for a grueling Senate primary battle in New Hampshire against former Senator John Sununu in a crucial 2026 race where the GOP aims to flip a longtime Democratic-held seat. Brown's the first major Republican to jump into the race to succeed retiring longtime Democratic Senator Jeannie Shaheen. According to this was reported on Tuesday that, this morning, he hauled in over $1.2 million in fundraising during his first full quarter as a candidate. That's according to figures shared with Fox News. Well, the left insists Antifa isn't a real organization despite multiple violent public incidents. Democratic lawmakers and liberal media pundits are increasingly claiming Antifa does not exist as President Trump works to squelch the far-left militant group after years of documented incidents of violence. According to former CNN journalist John Harwood, in his ex-post, no Antifa organization exists. This is a made-up organization. According to Democratic New York Representative Dan Goldman, he said, name one member of Antifa. If it explicitly exists for the overthrow of the United States government, where can I find that statement? Trump's trying to suppress the opposition by labeling anybody who dissents as a domestic terrorist. He said, don't be fooled. This is lawless and unconstitutional. Yes, we see them marching and protesting and rioting, but they don't exist. It's all made up. Well, Immigration sparked a range of opinions among students at the University of North Dakota. Head of Turning Point USA's This is the Turning Point tour stop on campus, Fox News spoke with students about President Trump's handling of the border security, illegal immigration, and the deployment of the National Guard to several major cities. And the students, of course, had mixed feelings about the National Guard deployment. One student named Kinley expressed her support for this and said as long as they're doing their job and keeping the city safe, it's a good idea. It's a great idea to keep everybody safe. The act of deploying stuff like that seems kind of like disunity to me because it's going to cause a lot of uproar, according to another student named Brett. And it pretty much came down to party lines, so to speak. Well, on that note, we're going to turn to our main topic for today. We're going to talk about some ongoing mysteries that have never been solved. A mystery is created by basically a lack of knowledge. And our universe is full of all kinds of things that simply cannot be explained. And this is due to the great ignorance on our part as human beings, not some secret. It's just a fact. Now, the universe is believed to come into existence about 13 billion years ago. Scientists, or those that identify themselves as scientists, tell us that that's when the universe had the Big Bang and came into reality by way of an entirely unknown and mysterious process. Now, there's 1 minute there was nothing, and in the next minute, bang, the universe. Now, the Earth itself is estimated to be about 4 billion years old. And we as human beings didn't make our entrance as early as possible until a few million years ago. Human ability to read, write, and reason in the meantime is just a few thousand years old. We kind of got a late start, I guess you could say. Our current situation is a little bit like somebody opening a book only to read the first few pages of it. Reader misses a great deal of history that's gone on before. Now, there could have been whole galactic empires, like George Lucas describes in his opening to Star Wars. And these galactic empires could have since turned into interstellar dust, I guess you could say. We wouldn't know the difference. And that's the whole point. It's our sheer ignorance that creates such a mystery for us about time and space. I mean, there's a lot of things we just don't know. Does Bigfoot exist? How about ghost? When you get right down to it, the only possible entity that might not find any of it mysterious would be the one that created it all. Everybody believes in the creator of the universe. That's also known as God, don't you know? But even if you don't, just pretend you do for a minute. Really, the only supreme architect of the universe that created it all could be entirely bereft of mystery. There wouldn't be any mystery for the creator because he's the one that created it. Don't you know? We're going to start out going to the country of India. And I have listeners in that country. There's an island in the Andaman Island chain, south of the Indian continent, which purports to be the most mysterious most mysterious inhabited island on the planet. And although it's claimed as territory by the Indian government, nobody from the civilized world dares set foot on it. In fact, India's gone so far as to make it illegal for anybody to even try to land on that island. And why might they do that, you ask? Well, it's just not safe. And although India claims the island is its own territory, those who live there regard it as very much their property and theirs alone, and they defend it as such. Anybody as much as steps on the beach, they'll be shot full of arrows almost immediately. The laws in place for anybody from trespassing on the island are for the safety of the trespassers just as much as they might be for the islanders themselves. Now, the mysterious inhabitants have lived on the island for tens of thousands of years. Nobody knows much of anything about them. Islands covered in forests that shield the islanders' dwellings even from overhead satellites. Island itself is circled by a network of razor-sharp coral reefs, and they prevent large boats from approaching. And it's this one crucial factor that's spared the islanders from previous encroachment. Back during the days of colonialization, huge freighters couldn't get near the island. Only possible approach was through the use of small boats, which left the visitors much more vulnerable to attack. The island doesn't even have a natural harbor to speak of. It also lacks any notable resources any would-be colonizer would want. And as a result, the hardship and severe risk to life and limb that such a trip might bring is simply not worth undertaking. Most interesting thing about the island, in fact, is the Sentinelese, or at least that's what the outside world calls them, people themselves. Who are they? We don't know. And why do they act the way that they do? That's a very good question, because their behavior toward outsiders is unique. In the past, when technologically advanced societies come in contact with Stone Age-level tribes, such as the Sentinelese, the locals usually had a mixed but fairly predictable reaction. Some might have run in fear, others might have shot a few arrows, others might have greeted the newcomers in awe and wonder. This last reaction, in fact, was probably more common, explaining the easy destruction of many native peoples in the history all over the globe. Now, most of the time, local indigenous peoples consider technological newcomers to be either gods or imbued with some sort of mystical power. This gave more advanced colonizers even more of an edge, since they could then exploit this belief even further. The Sentinelese, though, even when presented with modern society's most advanced implements, seemed not to care one way or the other. There were times that helicopter crews tried to get closer only to be screamed at, have rocks thrown at them, and arrows shot into the chopper blades. And those on the ground made it clear they were neither scared nor impressed by the helicopter. They just wanted it to go away. It's the ferocity with which the Sentinelese steadfastly stick to their isolation that presents itself as the most stunning and mysterious aspect of this entire island. Makes one wonder what's driving them to act in this manner. Do they have some sort of religion that demands they be set apart? Such things are unknown, because to this day absolutely nothing is known about the islanders' culture or potential religious beliefs. Even the exact numbers of islanders is not known. It's been said there are about 100 indigenous islanders on this tiny island at any given time. They seem to be in sync with their habitat and maintain this ideal population. They're hunter-gatherers and simply take what they need to survive, such as coconuts and fish, directly from the environment. Now, there have been times when outsiders have become concerned for the residents and reached out to help them. During the infamous 2004 tsunami that hit the region, efforts were made to help, but were steadfastly rebuffed by the islanders. After the tsunami, the Indian government sent a Navy helicopter out to drop off food, only to be met by a local warrior standing tall like a sentinel with a bow in hand and an arrow cocked, clearly warning the helicopter pilot to take his aid, go someplace else. His lone watchman was standing guard, even after much of the region had been devastated by the tsunami. That raises the question, what was he guarding? Contemplating such things has led to all matters of wild speculation. Some conspiracy theorists have come up with the idea that for great science fiction movies, with notions such as crashed UFOs and maybe even a UFO base in or around the island, even supported the idea that the Sentinelese are guarding some sort of interdimensional portal. But before we get too far into that, it's good to remember that the most likely explanation is that these people simply wish to be left alone and fiercely guard territory they consider to be theirs. Still, their ferocity, coupled with their incredible streak of independence, can't help but make you wonder, is there more to the story that we don't know? The Sentinelese don't seek or want help from the outside world, and no matter how primitive their condition might be, they're perfectly content with fending for themselves. The outside world, of course, remains curious about this isolated pocket of resistance. To this date, the most aggressive push to learn more about the North Sentinelese Island occurred in 1880 when a British expedition forced its way through the coral reefs and made a determined effort to explore the island. The exploration party is led by Maurice Vidal Portman, British colonial administrator at the time. Seeing this large group of heavily armed men, the Sentinelese decided they needed to know that outright aggression will get them nowhere. Instead, they changed tactics and decided to hide out deep in the forest of the island. Not all the Sentinelese are able to make the break for it. Eventually, the British stumbled upon a couple of older adults and some children who were apparently unable to relocate in time. Now, although the shocked Sentinelese couldn't understand a word of what the British told them, these alien invaders, as I'm sure they were referred to by the Sentinelese, the British, didn't hesitate to abduct the stunned, frightened locals. The British took that group out to their ship, eager to bring them back to port with them so that British specialists could poke and prod and see what made them tick. The older captives, though, began to grow sick and shortly died. Seems their immune system, kept in complete isolation from the germs of the outside world, were no match for the viruses that their captors carried. Portman must have felt bad about all this and had a change of heart. Instead of taking the youngsters who remained captive back with him, he gave them various items as gifts and put them back on the island. It said they promptly ran back into the forest where the rest of their tribe was still waiting, hidden from sight. British seemed to have mostly given up on the place after this debacle, and by the time India gained independence from Britain in 1947, the Indians were rather determined to forget about it as well. Now, there have been some attempts to learn more about the inhabitants on purely anthropological grounds, but any attempt has resulted in either the same shyness the British experienced or even outright hostility. There was an incident in 1975 when a film crew from National Geographic was attacked when they got just a little bit too close. A warrior launched an arrow from the beach and managed to hit the director of the documentary in the leg as he stood in a boat nearby. Of course, the Sentinelese have reason to be wary of outsiders. They don't know who's there to study them and who's there to hurt them. There have been times the Sentinelese have been killed in large numbers by salvagers and poachers who find their way to the island to salvage shipwrecks or to poach exotic fish. 2006, a couple of poachers seeking a big haul in mud crabs actually wrecked into the island after a bit of drinking were never heard from again. Islanders made short work of them. Even those more idealistic claims have met a similar fate. 2018, John Chow, a Christian missionary from Hong Kong, dared to try to share the gospel of Jesus Christ with those stony-faced sentinels on the island. The Bible indeed instructs Christians to tell the whole world about the good news of Jesus Christ and the resurrection from the dead. I mean, we're talking basically Christianity 101. And when the Bible suggests the mission field is the whole world, it means the whole world. And it's for this reason a lot of Christians insist that every inch of the planet has to have missionaries sent to it to proclaim the gospel. There's some that go even further and suggest that the only thing that's preventing the second coming of Christ is the fact that this missionary goal of spreading the gospel message to every inch of the planet hadn't yet been fulfilled. There are Christians even today who are thoroughly convinced that if they can reach people such as the Sentinelese who've never even heard the name of Jesus and preach the gospel, their missionary work will be fulfilled and Jesus is going to come back. Now, John Chow, the ill-fated missionary, believed that. In fact, shortly before his death, he referred to this island as perhaps being Satan's last stronghold. Well, this is not disparaging the Sentinelese themselves. It's just the Christian way of viewing the world. For those who are serious about the Christian faith, like Chow, there's a deep belief in the spiritual warfare. There's belief that if God is not present by way of Christian believers inhabiting the island, then the land is in darkness. And it's believed by many that in this vacuum in which the Spirit of God is not present, the spirits of darkness automatically take hold. This belief is also found throughout the Bible. It speaks of wicked spirits and princes and principalities having dominion over whole swaths of territory when there are no Christian believers present. Well, John Chow was a firm believer, 26 years old, when his passionate belief in the need to spread Christianity convinced him to go on his own solo mission to North Sentinel Island in 2018. He paid some fishermen to take him as far as they felt comfortable and then disembarked in his own kayak to paddle the rest of the way to this strange, mysterious island. And his first approach probably stunned the islanders. He showed up with Bible in hand, shouting, "My name is John, I love you, and Jesus loves you." They got over their momentary shock and began gesturing angrily for him to leave immediately. Well, he heeded their warning initially, but soon returned. This time, the islanders showed they meant business by firing several arrows. They might not have been trying to kill him. I mean, these are more than likely warning shots. And John left and again shortly returned for a third attempt. This time, those shooting the arrows had better aim. It was in November 17, 2018, that one of the fishermen that John had previously befriended brought his boat close enough to get a glimpse of a terrible sight. He saw the Sentinelese in the process of burying a bloody body. John Chow's body, don't you know? Many were quick to heap scorn on the zealous missionary for trying to interfere with the isolated peoples of this island, but John Chow was simply doing what he earnestly believed he should do as a Christian. He felt this was the last place on earth where the gospel message hadn't been delivered, and he thought if he did deliver it, Christ would soon return. Well, there are many who would poke fun at such a belief, but John's not the only Christian who believes such things. He's just one of the extremely rare few who might take it on their own hands and risk life and limb to try and do something about it. And despite the best efforts of explorers and anthropologists and government officials and daring missionaries, the island and its asserted people still remain a baffling mystery. Well, from mysterious islands, let's talk about something I've touched on: poltergeist. The pesky, noisy ghost the Germans told us about that the rest of the world hoped they'd forget. Poltergeists are noisy nuisances with all the supposed banging on the walls and rattling on the windows. Of course, some odd sounds have entirely rational explanations. Others are a bit more mind-boggling. Maybe one of the most infamous of these noisy little creatures is the supposed Mackenzie poltergeist in Greyfriars. This popular poltergeist is situated in and around Greyfriars Cemetery in the Scottish city of Edinburgh. And those who visited this place have quite consistently spoken about how some invisible force seems to slap, kick, and punch, and even scratch them. Now, the site itself has a rather long and, I guess you could say, haunted history. The site was once home to a notorious prison that employed torture as part of its normal, everyday routine. And there are rumors of ancient witchcraft rituals said to have taken place on the grounds. Then there are the accounts of grave robbing, body snatching, corpse dumping, and folks occasionally even being buried alive. And these things, of course, aren't nice to think about, but if the spirits of any of these corpses that were robbed and dumped and buried alive are still hanging around, they might indeed be a little annoyed as to what had happened to them. So perhaps these poltergeists wanted to make a fuss and become a rather loud ghost. I mean, if they did, who could blame them? The cemetery has since been visited by all kinds of paranormal experts wanting to see something. And the eyewitness accounts of these visits still continue to boggle the mind. It said there are inexplicably cold spots that one could find in the cemetery any day of the year. And there are also unexplainable odors and loud banging sounds. Also, were visceral experiences of folks claiming to have been hit and kicked and scratched and punched by an invisible tormentor. This devious fiend has been dubbed the Mackenzie poltergeist. And even more alarming, perhaps, is the fact that some folks seem to have an outright fainting fit upon entering certain parts of the cemetery. It says that dozens of people have passed out as they're knocked to the ground by some unknown presence. The area was actually considered so troubling at one point the whole sections of the cemetery were cordoned off, made off limits to the general public. And as is often the case with these mind-boggling mysteries, there's absolutely nothing by way of hard, concrete evidence to prove these claims. Some attempts to capture evidence of this phenomenon have been made. Most of these usually fall short of the mark, or worse, reveal the supposed phenomena to be a hoax. The most intriguing poltergeist hoaxes to be uncovered, in fact, was documented by an entire news crew for the NBC program Dateline. This case revolved around a supposed poltergeist which called itself Sami. Sami poltergeist had tormented the whole family ever since they moved into a new home, or At least that was the story. They were seeking immediate relief. They were clutching at straws, hoping to prove something. They hoped that a news crew might be able to find the secret source of the ghoul that was disrupting their life. Most of the disruptions that they experienced centered around the family telephone. This was in the late 1990s, before cell phones were in vogue, and family relied on landline phones in their home. And this strange entity would call them and speak in a bizarre, menacing voice that scared the crap out of the family members. And even worse, a supposed poltergeist would make remarks about the inner workings of the family no outsider could know. Well, it would soon be discovered, though, that the source of this mischief wasn't an outsider at all, but one of the family's own disturbed sons. This revelation wasn't uncovered by the folks at NBC. They considered it still an unsolvable mystery. After their docudrama on the supposed poltergeist had already aired, the boy behind the haunting finally fessed up. Son admitted to being unhappy and even feeling neglected. It seemed he wanted attention, so he started playing pranks. He claimed he wished he could admit to his involvement, but once the ball was set in motion, he didn't quite know how to come forward and put a stop to it. Now, that sounds likely enough, but even so, there were some aspects that still didn't seem to add up. Prior to this confession, some rather extraordinary claims had been made about this particular poltergeist. It said at one point even the ringtone of the family phone would change and make scary, weird noises. Now again, we're talking about a landline phone that normally has a set ringtone that does not change. So how would this kid change it? Well, such things perhaps can be attributed to either unconscious exaggeration after the fact, or maybe just the overactive imagination of worried people who are already nervous wrecks and prone to seek out strange happenings. Interestingly enough, whether it's a hoax or a real aspect of the supernatural, it's typically said that poltergeists tend to center around young people. For whatever reason, troubled teenagers seem to be a magnet for poltergeist activities. An infamous instance of paranormal angst was the Enfield poltergeist, named after Enfield, England. This noisy ghost seemed to attach itself to a young girl who lived there in the late 1970s. The outside world was first drawn to this case when the girl's mother, her name was Peggy, phoned the police stating she'd seen furniture and other objects move by themselves, and the police showed up and they also witnessed some of these inexplicable paranormal happenings. The home would become the center of one of the most intense paranormal investigations up to that date, and many more would witness seemingly impossible feats instigated by the alleged poltergeist. Feats included Peggy's two daughters, Janet and Margaret, floating up into the air. There's even a famous photo of Janet allegedly doing as much, but there are those who consider it a hoax. There's always naysayers. They insist that perhaps she was just jumping on her bed and the camera snapped a photo while she was in midair. Well, Janet since admitted she did exaggerate some of the happenings, even while insisting there really was a poltergeist and a plethora of unexplained activity that occurred in the Green Street Enfield home. The debate over cases like this rages still decades later. No matter what anybody concludes, these noisy ghosts known as poltergeists still have a habit of showing up from time to time. Well, we got another mystery. This mystery is actually mind-boggling. It's about a spiral staircase that shouldn't exist. Now, it's usually the big mysteries such as the Bermuda Triangle and the Loch Ness Monster and Bigfoot to get all the attention, but sometimes small, odd anomalies can be just as mind-boggling. Let's take the highly unusual spiral staircase inside an old church in New Mexico. It's known as the Loretto Chapel. It dates back nearly 150 years. Staircase was put in place when the nuns complained about having to use a ladder to get to their choir loft. It's very uncomfortable for them to climb ladders in the long robes they wore, and efforts were made to install a staircase. Several carpenters were brought in for this purpose. They all left discouraged, stating their belief it was an impossible task. The chapel, you see, is small and built in such a way that your typical large staircase simply wouldn't fit. The only kind of staircase that would appear to work would be a spiral staircase, and even that seemed to be too difficult to engineer in a precise enough manner to connect to the upper loft. Nobody wanted to do the job. It was in such a state of despair that the nuns began praying for a solution. Some, in fact, according to the story, prayed to the patron saint of carpenters, Joseph, the earthly father figure of Jesus. Well, it said they prayed to St. Joseph for 9 straight days, and on the 9th day they got a visitor to the chapel.
There was an old man in weather-beaten clothes with a bunch of old, seemingly outdated tools, rode up to the church on the back of a donkey. He didn't seem like a master carpenter, but he insisted with quiet confidence he could build precisely what's the type of staircase they were looking for. The man worked only when nobody else was around, but considering that the only tools he ever was seen with were a saw and tubs of warm water that the wood was soaked in, it remains a mystery how he actually built the staircase. But after a short time, the man had built what amounts to a double helix-shaped, perfectly spiral staircase that winds straight up from the ground in narrow curls all the way up to the choir loft. Well, whoever this man might have been, he never revealed his identity, never even accepted payment for the labor. After he'd finished his work, he packed up, left, never came back. Reward is even posted for the man to name himself, come forward, and take credit for his exquisite masterpiece. But unfortunately, nobody ever came forward. The nuns who prayed for this deliverance, though, must have an idea where their master carpenter went. They likely feel this particular God-sent carpenter simply returned to heaven from whence he came. But the wood the staircase was built from, though, is another matter altogether. In more recent years, the former manager of the chapel, Richard Lindsley, actually cut away a sample of wood from the staircase and went so far as to take it to a lab for analysis. They got some surprising results in return. Revealed the wood came from a previously unknown subspecies of spruce. This wood's unnaturally strong with densely packed molecules. Seems to explain the unusual strength and resilience of the staircase. The wood itself is believed to be similar to that found in the great spruce trees that make up frozen forest in the cold far north. We're talking northern Canada or maybe even Russia. So how in the world did it end up in New Mexico in the 19th century? Well, that's a tale that we don't have an answer to. The mystery of this staircase only seems to deepen with time. Well, you ever thought about miracles? The very word invokes a sense of wonder. But there are those who would scoff at any such notion, and surprisingly, some of the biggest scoffers are from the religious sector. This was made clear in 1988 when a wave of sightings of Mother Mary in the Philippines was derided by a Catholic cardinal who decided to debunk them as manifestations of hunger pains. Rather than ascribing the Marian apparitions to the divine, Cardinal Jaime Sin, interesting name for a priest, don't you think, went on record to state the local villagers in Manila were simply hungry. Insinuated recent famine-like conditions led to mass delusions, and this, of course, was a logical explanation for villagers' claims that Mother Mary herself had descended from heaven to be among them. Well, not only that, the witnesses on the ground stated that Mary appeared to have somehow superimposed herself onto the sun. As they stared up at the sun seemed to spin and give off a variety of different colors and before their very eyes. Catholic officials were a bit incredulous, of course, and Cardinal Sin himself went on the record to state, when you're hungry, you see visions, so my advice is to eat. When you're not hungry, you won't be seeing the visions. Well, ironically, some of the best prophets of the Bible experience their best visions after several days of praying and fasting. Fasting, of course, is the process of depriving yourself of food. This cardinal is apparently directing folks to enjoy a sandwich so they can stop seeing visions. Well, we shouldn't be at all surprised that some of the biggest skeptics of divine occurrences might actually come from the religious leaders. Jesus himself is said to have dealt with similar pushback from the clergy. He had some of his greatest debates with the religious scribes of his day, some of whom are so insistent on disbelieving his supposed miracles they even ascribed apparent miraculous healings to Satan. It was this argument, of course, that led Jesus to famously argue that a house divided couldn't possibly stand. Logically impossible for him to cast out Satan by the works of Satan. There are always religious authority figures who seem to want to do nothing, have nothing to do with miraculous and supernatural events. They seem to think it's their job as religious gatekeepers is being threatened when supernatural events beyond their control take place. If the good Cardinal Sin could have very well been referring to a kind of spiritual hunger, as in people being hungry for something bigger than their everyday experience, he might have been closer to the mark. But despite his rejection of the claim, there are plenty of people around the world who've seen what they believe to be manifestations of the divine. But it's perhaps the Marian apparitions or visions of Mary that have gained the most attention in modern times. So we're going to look at a couple of these particular manifestations. In these supposed visions, Mary can either appear by herself or maybe with Jesus. She might appear holding a baby Jesus and with a full-grown Jesus by her side. Might also be accompanied by angels or some of the other saints. And more often than not, it's children who report that Marian apparitions first, followed by adults who might suddenly get turned into the vision as well. Most famous of all, of course, begins in Fatima, Portugal, early spring of 1916. Manifestations of Mary were first perceived by a few youngsters, but it quickly alerted the entire village as to what was happening. At least in this instance, the adults took note and actually bore witness to the same supernatural manifestations. The fact that a whole village could see something so incredible is kind of hard to discount. Only logical explanation without accepting miraculous as an explanation would be to say the entire village experienced a sort of mass hallucination. According to this theory, it's those pesky hallucinatory hunger pangs at work, just like Cardinal Sin suggested. Along with this mass sighting, there are also plenty of sightings of Mary that occur to folks when they're alone. These sightings, of course, are quite easy to dismiss since they didn't have but the one witness. One could easily discount a sighting one person had of Mother Mary while they were all by their lonesome was either a hallucination, a hoax, or even just wishful thinking. It's the mass sightings that are more mind-boggling because short of a mass hallucination, there really isn't an easy explanation behind these occurrences. Most extraordinary of the visions at Fatima, Portugal, occurred October 13, 1917. Go down in history as the Day of the Dancing Sun miracle. In this vision, hundreds of people claim to see the sun fall from the sky and begin to move in a literal dance about the horizon. Anybody with a basic scientific understanding of the solar system knows this is technically impossible. And despite its seemingly smaller size in the sky, the sun is vastly bigger than the Earth. In fact, the Earth revolves around the sun. If the sun were to move in the manner the folks at Fatima described, the Earth would likely be flung out of orbit. Also, the fact that if the sun did anything as extraordinary as this in Earth's skies, it wouldn't have been just the folks gathered in the village of Fatima, Portugal. They would have seen it. Been everybody in the world by all they had to do is look up and see the sun dancing about in the sky. But it was just the people of Fatima that bore witness to this event. One could start casting aspersions on multiple people's characters and suggest that those gathered there were either drunk, a bunch of liars, or a combination of both. But that's actually easier said than done, since there are a lot of credible people present who nobody would ever expect to lie, let alone make up such a big, seemingly bizarre lie. Well, on that note, we come to the end of today's show. We'll be back tomorrow, and once again, we'll be talking about mysteries of the unexplained. Until then, this is Ken Hudnall for the Ken Hudnall Show saying have a truly great evening.